Hello, I'm Cindy Arenberg-Seltzer, President and CEO of the Children's Services Council of Broward County. In this special edition of Future First Focus on Broward's Children, we have invited our guests to join us here at the Children's Services Council offices. In addition to our sunny skies and beautiful beaches, one of the most attractive features of our community is its broad diversity. According to recent data from the U.S. Census Bureau, natives of every continent but Antarctica and over 100 countries make their home in Broward County. The same data shows that over 30% of the population in Broward County is comprised of either naturalized citizens or non-naturalized immigrants. All of this makes for a bustling, thriving, and ever-growing community. But there are some challenges. Depending on the specific status of each individual who is here as an immigrant, changes in policies and laws at the federal level can cause confusion, controversy, and in some cases, even fear. It is especially confusing for American-born children of immigrant families. That is why dozens of community partners have come together to form the Children of Immigrant Families Committee of the Broward County Children's Strategic Plan, in support of ensuring due process and transparency when it comes to the rights and supports related to immigrant families. Today, to help us unravel some of the issues and challenges facing immigrant families and their children, are Megan Humphreys, staff attorney with Americans for Immigrant Justice, and Randy McGorty, executive director of Catholic Charities Legal Services. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Good morning, thank you.
As we sit here in January of 2019, the topic of immigration is high on many people's lists. It has roiled our Congress, it has roiled our community. There's talk of open borders and let everybody in, and immigrants are bad. But as I mentioned in the opening, 30% of our population are immigrants. I myself am a first-generation American. The question of immigration is an important one, and obviously important to your organizations and to so many people in this community. Randy, Catholic Charities has been in the forefront of this issue around immigration for many years. Can you talk a little bit about why Catholic Charities would be involved and what its role has been?
Sure. The bishops of the Catholic Church in America have been very strong and very eloquent in defense of the rights of immigrants. Many of the people in the pews, many of the people we worship with, many of the people who attend our schools are from another country. Many of the, particularly those in South Florida, are Catholic. And so it's right that we address the needs of Catholics, but of everyone, because it's not just a Catholic issue, it's a human rights issue. It's an issue for South Florida, because as you said, 30%, 1 out of 3. When you're in a meeting of your neighbors, look to your left, look to your right, one of you will be an immigrant. So it's very important that we make sure that the laws of our country are followed and the needs of our neighbors are met.
And when we talk about this issue, explain what an immigrant is. That sounds like a crazy question, but really today, I don't know that everybody understands what immigrant means. It's somehow become a bad word. What is an immigrant?
An immigrant is someone who is coming to the United States for one reason or another from another country, essentially.
Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
They can come here legally. They can come here illegally, I suppose. They can come here with documents. We hear a lot about people coming across the border, hordes of immigrant people just storming across the border. Is that how most immigrants enter this country?
So most immigrants come through some kind of process. The whole debate is sort of centered on the manner of entry, right? So the vast majority of people from another country have some kind of lawful status. We estimate, and it's only an estimate because we don't know exactly the numbers. There's no way to count everyone. but we estimate about 10 to 12 million people are here without the authorization, without the protections of law. How they came, a variety of ways. Most of the people in that status actually did enter lawfully at some point and could not return home for one reason or another. The second group came through the border, either the southern border or the northern border. Here in South Florida, we forget that we're a border state, and a very important part of our immigrant history are our Cuban and Haitian neighbors who came by boat and sought either the protection of a special law called the Cuban Adjustment Act or political asylum.
So when we talk about documented immigrants or coming here legally, what kinds of legal ways do immigrants enter the country?
One of the main ways that someone can enter legally is what's called a tourist visa or a B2 visa, where it's something that they applied for with the U.S. consulate or embassy in their home country, and it was approved, and then they were allowed to come into the United States, usually for 6 months at a time. That's one of the most common ways that someone enters lawfully. There are cases where someone can actually enter as a lawful permanent resident if they went through a procedure to gain lawful permanent residence, again at a U.S. embassy or consulate in their home country, and actually came as a lawful permanent resident. Although we're still seeing a lot of circumstances where that may not be permanent, and they have some other issue that they need representation for afterwards. And also there's several countries that have what's called a visa waiver program, or now it's called ESTA, where they have a relationship with the United States, and they're able to come in a little bit more easily for a shorter period of time to travel.
And then for some of those who entered, as you mentioned, Randy, that got then temporary protected status, that may have been before or after they entered the country?
So our law has built into it several humanitarian programs. One of those humanitarian programs is called temporary protected status. And it's a tool that our government can use to protect people who, in their home country, there was some kind of devastating event, either a natural disaster or pervasive civil strife. Our government decides that country conditions are so dangerous that we can't in good conscience send people back. So we give them respite here. It's meant to be temporary, but as you know, some natural disasters, and we look now, we just recently celebrated the 9th anniversary of the earthquake in Haiti. 250,000 people died in a single evening. The conditions were so bad that we said to our Haitian community here, you don't need to go home. Stay here. We'll give you the right to work. One of the most meaningful professional services that I did in my 25-year career was help the Haitian community obtain temporary protected status and get work authorization so that they could send money home. They worked hard, and they actually rebuilt and continue to rebuild their country through the remittances that they send home from the income they generate here. And by the way, their work here in South Florida is much appreciated.
Absolutely. Yes, I know so many Haitians personally and have never seen such an incredible work ethic among those that I've had the good fortune to work with. So you both are lawyers. You're spending a lot of time working with clients in this community. What are some of the types of cases that you're seeing, and why the lawyers are getting involved in this work?
Well, it's estimated even among people that don't have any status at this time, DACA or temporary protected status, that between 14 and 16% of people in the United States without any status at this time actually are eligible for some kind of relief under immigration laws as they stand today. So we're trying.
That's really powerful.
That is.
I want that to sink into people, that there are people living here in this country now who don't have papers but really could be documented legal immigrants.
Yes,
Go ahead.
exactly.
And so
So we're trying to reach out to as many people as we can to say to people without documents, or even people with temporary protected status or DACA right now, as those programs stand at this time, it's not possible to gain lawful permanent residence through those programs. It's still good to come in and speak to an attorney to see if you are actually eligible for something that would lead to a green card and lawful permanent resident status. A lot of the cases that we see are family petitions, people who have relatives here in the United States that have citizenship or permanent residency and can petition for a family member. We see a lot of humanitarian cases as well, people who entered the United States in one way or another and would like to seek asylum. And a lot of other humanitarian cases as well, people who have been victims of a crime here in the United States and assisted our law enforcement in investigating that crime. And also people who have been victims of domestic violence or some other kind of trafficking are also have certain relief. So we see a great variety of cases.
Wow. I had no idea that some of those people would have been eligible.
Mm-hmm.
That's important. Anybody else? Any other groups? If someone is watching now and is worried about whether they might be eligible or not, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to come and talk to an attorney. One of the main things that we do here, we partner, Americans for Immigrant Justice partners a lot with Catholic Legal Services as well. In addition to intakes in our office, we collaborate on Saturday clinics all around South Florida, usually twice a month. We have a clinic going on where it's open to the public and you can come and speak to an attorney. I would recommend they come in and speak to an attorney. The ones that I had mentioned, those types of relief, are just some of the potential forms of relief. But without actually speaking to someone in person, being able to evaluate their individual case, it's hard to say whether or not they are eligible for something.
And this really bears repeating. National studies, our own experiences, in the joint efforts we've done. 1 out of 6 people have a way to correct their immigration status.
Wow.
1 out of 6. So I'm not here to be the political correct police or the language police. My problem with the term illegal is that it is simply inaccurate. Megan did a very brief but very good summary of the different kinds of visas people can obtain, the different kind of statuses here. You and I talked about how that status can change. It's really complicated. So most people, most legal experts agree that the 2 most complex, difficult parts of federal law are tax law and immigration law. Many of the people we serve are unsophisticated, and they don't have the means to afford a lawyer. Without someone to guide them through this incredibly complex system, they fall prey to either notarios, who basically are frauds pretending to be lawyers, or they do nothing and they fall out of status through no fault of their own. So it's really important that someone who has a question about their immigration status reach out to an immigration attorney or a qualified agency such as ours to see what their options are. We're not here to help people break the law. We're here to make sure the law is followed and that the law isn't breaking people.
Really good point. I appreciate that. As we sit here at the Children's Services Council, I have to ask you about how this is affecting children and how their status might be different from their parents. Can one of you speak to that?
Sure. Well, particularly with temporary protected status, I think one of the most common things we hear is that an estimated 300,000 people have temporary protected status at this time, and that's, I think, 100,000, 150,000 or so United States-born children of those people. So it's not even a matter of whether or not a child has a question in their own status, but whether or not their parents or other supporting family members would be allowed to remain here with them. And then that opens you up to a whole other set of questions, whether or not you're facing a separation of a family, or whether United States citizen children would need to return home to a country that's foreign to them. with their parents if their parents aren't allowed to stay here.
So Megan is making the really important points. This idea of separation of families. We saw it last July, and we saw sort of these horrific images of children in basically warehouses screaming for their parents, and they were separated at the border. Fortunately, we as Americans collectively demanded that that practice stop. But we are facing now with the many people who've been under humanitarian programs such as temporary protected status. Another one that Megan mentioned but we haven't talked about is DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. People who came here under the age of 16 and through no fault of their own became unlawfully present. That population together have given birth to about 500,000 U.S. citizen children. So as those programs end, we are about to see family separation on a huge scale. Moms and dads of U.S. citizen children will be deported unless we address those programs. 500,000.
And you talk about that family separation policy, which even though it's officially not in effect, seems to still be in effect. This issue of the children of immigrant families first came to light before all of that arose, as we had children. I remember it came to my attention, there was a student, Broward County schools, parents went out, left that child home, a teenager, so there's nothing crazy about leaving them home, but while the rest of the family was out, they got captured and put in detention, and I think he was 17-year-old was left going, where's my family? Is that still happening?
If you'd like to go ahead.
Sure, it is. So I think it's important for everyone to realize that immigration enforcement has always been tough. It was very tough under the prior administration. To date, the Obama administration remains the champion of deportations. What has changed in the new administration is the focus. Under the prior administration, there were sort of clear guidelines who was at risk to deportation, and they focused on people with criminal records. That was their target. People who lived among us, remained among us, had a clean record, were lesser priorities. The new administration changed those priorities. They made everyone here without status a priority. So that meant that resources were shifted from criminal deportation to moms and dads of U.S. citizen children. They're as equally at risk as a rapist or murderer for deportation under the current policy guidelines.
So one of the things that I've read along these lines, and I want to check with the experts because you can read all kinds of things, is that to your point about criminal status, before, I believe, under the Obama administration, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the criminal status was some crime not related to immigration. So it was a burglary, a rape, some physical or property crime. Whereas now, when you talk about a crime, there's a little bit of a perhaps bootstrapping happening, that the crime is being here illegally, and therefore or being here undocumented. That is the crime for which we are basing that you are a criminal. Is that true?
So one of the things that we can refer to, and yes, under the Obama administration, it was a violation of a state or federal criminal law, was what was defined as a criminal. But a lot of times now we're kind of seeing that perspective change. Under American law, under international law, for someone to come to the U.S. border at a port of entry and seek asylum is not illegal. They have the right to seek asylum at a port of entry.
That is current law.
Yes.
Current law says you can show up at a port of entry and seek asylum.
It's enshrined in our law, and it is part of treaties that we have signed.
Okay. Didn't mean to get you off track there, but
Not
it's
at
such
all.
an important
Yes,
point.
it is a very important point, and I think it's misunderstood. But now we are seeing a little bit of a shift in perspective. One of the things that was the policy change that actually caused what was known as the family separation last summer was starting to prosecute illegal entry, unlawful entry of people who came into the United States not at a port of entry, which is technically a violation of federal law, but it's a misdemeanor, it's a minor crime. And one of the concerns now is that we're seeing a lot more focus on and a lot more time spent on these minor violations, and it's a kind of changing what exactly who should be defined as a criminal.
So, under current law, simply being here without proper immigration status is not a criminal violation. Where we're seeing people picked up, under Florida, for example, most traffic violations are a misdemeanor. So many people we encounter in our detention work, and both Americans for Immigrant Justice and our agency does extensive work with the Broward Transitional Center, which is an immigration facility, and Chrome. We're seeing people who are picked up for maybe a tail light out, or not coming to a complete stop. And then the policeman does follow-up questions about their immigration status, takes them into custody. You and I would simply pay a fine, but they are transferred to immigration custody and deportation is being sought.
Wow. Wow. So don't let your taillight go out. Or,
It's a huge problem.
so we have about 4 minutes left. What are the most important things that you would like folks to know as they watch today, January 2019, about what they should do, what they should watch out for, where they can go?
I would say that there is a lot of controversy, a lot of confusion. We're seeing policy changes coming down almost weekly right now that is causing a lot of confusion in the community. So anyone who has a question or a concern, please be sure to reach out to an attorney, one of our organizations or another qualified immigration attorney before you apply for anything, or especially if you've had previous contact with immigration officials. Please reach out to an attorney to see if there's any assistance or any guidance that we can provide.
You know, you just said asking for things. So I know that's been another area of confusion, is what social services or what help immigrants might have taken advantage of that's going to create a problem for them in seeking their legal status.
One of the changes that this administration has proposed is a rethinking of a specific part of the law. It's called the ground of inadmissibility for public charge. It's a very hyper-technical term. What it means, and it's an old law, it's been around and on our books for 150 years. We want to make sure that people come here and that they're willing to work and contribute to our community. So we've always made it difficult for people who might come here and become a drain. So we want to make sure they don't become a public charge by abusing what benefits they might obtain. So this is about to become very, very difficult. So even certain public benefits that you have an absolute right to might make you a public charge, might make you inadmissible, which means you can't reside here lawfully.
Wow.
It's a huge issue. Do you want to
It is
elaborate
a
a
huge
little
issue,
bit?
sure. I would just add to that. You know, it's something that we're very concerned about and that we're watching closely. Nothing has changed as of January 2019. Everything that we're hearing right now is still just a proposal, and nothing has gone into effect yet. But as Randy was saying, yes, it's something that could have broad implications, and something that we're watching closely. And again, please reach out to an attorney. If you have any questions about it, we can try to explain it more. But again, it is an individualized assessment, so it's hard to say too much else that would affect any one individual without having spoken to them.
Megan, do you want to give the number where people can call to access one of our clinics?
Sure. I would have them reach out to Americans for Immigrant Justice. Our main number is 305-573-1106, and we can tell people where they can come in and receive a free legal consultation, meet with an attorney for free to review their individual circumstances.
Well, the two of you were the absolute perfect guests to talk about this issue. You were clear, and I really appreciate all the information that you've provided. Our viewers should remember that this show was taped in January of 2019, as we've mentioned several times, and given the fluidity of the issue, it's important to find accurate resources and consult them and legal advisors regularly. One website you may want to be aware of is immigrantfamily.org. It has lots of localized and regional information, as well as updates to federal laws and policies. I want to thank Megan Humphreys and MgcGorty for their help in clarifying this complex issue. I've been your host, Cindy Ehrenberg-Seltzer. For this or any other episode of Future First Focus on Broward's Children, go to our website, cscbroward.org, where you can access our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and remember to join us next time on Future First Focus on Broward's Children.